Hey everybody, it's time for another gaming vlog. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this series, this is where I talk a little bit about some games that I'm currently playing, touch on some other creative projects that I'm working on, and give you an update on future plans for the channel. The featured game for this episode is the first early access build of The Guild 3, which is a pretty interesting game that I've been looking forward to taking a look at for a long time now, as the concept of the Guild as a series of games has always been inherently interesting to me, despite being a single-player experience. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Guild series, it's basically a life simulator set in medieval times, where you play as an individual character in a sort of living, breathing, simulated world that allows you to participate in trade, political intrigue, and the building of a multi-generational familial dynasty. The thing that's particularly interesting about the Guild 3 to me is that it's shaping up to be the first game in the series to include a multiplayer component, which will, in theory, allow up to 16 players to play cooperatively or competitively in the same simulated environment. To me, this presents a really interesting and potentially exciting opportunity for role-playing and/or group play with or against the multitude of concurrent systems present in the simulation. And the simulation itself is the real star of this game, as it by design creates a sort of non-linear, non-scripted, varied every time you play through it sort of experience. Now, of course, this being the very first early access build of the game, there are tons and tons of glitches, user interface issues, incomplete features, and performance optimization problems. However, if you've got a fairly beefy rig, a copious amount of patience, and a genuine interest in identifying and reporting bugs to help the development process of the game, the Guild 3 might be something worth taking a look at even in early access. It's also worth noting that the game is being offered at a lower price in early access, so if you, like me, have confidence in this developer's ability to eventually produce a feature-complete and polished gameplay experience, you might want to grab it now while it's at a reduced cost, keeping in mind the rules associated with Steam's return policy, such as not playing for more than 2 hours if you're unsure as to whether or not you want to keep the game and such. The early access nature of this game kind of leads me into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the fact that this will probably be one of, if not the last early access games that I end up purchasing on Steam. Since the launch of early access several years ago, I've actually purchased several games that have ended up becoming quite fun, complete, satisfying experiences for me, so it's not that I have anything inherently against the early access concept. But I've also reached a point with my gameplay habits and the current state of my game library where I don't really feel compelled, for the most part, to seek out a lot of new gameplay experiences. Basically, for whatever type of game I want to play at a given time, be it a racing game or a first-person shooter, a strategy game, or what have you, I have one or more games in my library that I either haven't quite finished or feel that I can return to whenever I need to satisfy that particular itch. The end result of this is that I increasingly feel myself less and less incentivized to go out and try new games or seek out new games to play because I'm generally satisfied with what I already have access to. Now, of course, some of you might be thinking or wondering what that means for the channel in terms of gaming-related content, and the simple truth of it is that it probably is going to end up affecting things at least a little bit. As much as I enjoy making this sort of content and sharing it with you folks, the simple fact of the matter is that there are considerations involved in doing so that go beyond simple want or enjoyment. One major consideration along those lines is the fact that it takes a significant amount of time, effort, and money for me to create these sorts of videos. Between purchasing games, spending time to familiarize myself with them, recording footage to use, editing that footage, determining what it is that I'm actually going to say to talk about the game, and putting that whole package together and getting it out there on YouTube in an appropriate manner, the various costs to me can actually end up being quite significant. And with all of the other things that I tend to have going on at any given time, from earning a living to other creative projects and hobbies and such, there does sort of reach a point where I have to decide whether or not the amount of time and effort that it takes to create a video like this is worth it versus those other possibilities. In thinking about all this, I've come to the conclusion that I want to be a little bit more judicious in terms of determining what games I actually cover and how I cover them moving forward. While I have several long-running series here on the channel, such as Initial Impressions and State of the Game, and even the infrequent but generally well-received Why It's Awesome series, I've become conscious in recent months in particular that I've kind of been falling into a bit of a rut when it comes to gaming content creation. And that's something that I'm definitely keen to avoid because, quite frankly, the competition here on YouTube for gaming-themed content is so great that I really feel it's important for whatever content I do to stand out or have some kind of unique element to it to sort of justify its existence. At the end of the day, there are so many places where you folks could be going to watch a review or an initial impressions piece on a given game that in a lot of ways the effort that I put into those projects, while fun and satisfying and interesting, at least to me and a handful of you, isn't necessarily the best place for me to spend my time and effort and energy and money versus other things that I could possibly be doing. Of course, I don't want to paint myself into a corner and say that I'm never going to do another initial impressions video or a state of the game video or what have you, and I don't really feel the need to completely close the book on any of those series. But I definitely do think it is time to consider changing things up a little bit in terms of what I'm doing here on the channel and pushing even further towards the quality over quantity side of things. One of my big goals for the channel from the very beginning has always been to make sure that I don't waste anybody's time and to produce content that's as unique, interesting, informative, and hopefully entertaining as possible. And while I feel like I've generally stuck to that for the most part, I've definitely felt, especially since my return to producing this sort of content after the break I took in the middle of the summer, that I've been sort of going through the motions perhaps a bit too much and a little bit too much on autopilot as far as my content creation has gone. So what I'm planning to do over the next couple of months is really take a step back and rethink the sort of videos that I do that are gaming related, while also reconsidering the idea of bringing more non-gaming related videos to the channel as I have in the past with music videos and that sort of thing. At the end of the day, my goal for the channel is just to make it as interesting and compelling as possible. And I think a big part of that for me is making sure that I'm as enthusiastic and interested and excited about doing the content as I want you to be about watching it. So I think I'm going to basically reiterate what I said in my previous channel update, in that the expectation moving forward for the channel should probably be that there's going to be some change. I haven't quite decided in what form that change will manifest, but I feel like the time is right for some experimentation, and hopefully you folks will enjoy coming along for the ride. Finally, I did want to mention, for those of you who missed my previous video about it, that I did recently publish a work of fiction that some of you might be interested in checking out. I actually did a video specifically about the book, which is called The Big Men, which I'll link to in the description box down below, that I think does a much better job of describing the project and providing all the information regarding it than I can do in a few seconds here. Needless to say, this was a pretty big effort on my part and something that I spent a lot of resources creating, so I definitely wanted to make sure that as many people knew about it as possible, which is why I'm mentioning it again here. Having said all that, I think I'm going to bring this rambly type video to a close. Hopefully you folks have enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more videos from me in the future, be sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you next time.